Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 4 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the power of direct mail in a digital age. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Dave Fink, CEO and co-founder of Postie. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we start by you giving a little background on yourself, as well as what led up to you co-founding Postie, and we'll definitely get to Postie in a minute.
Yeah, sure. So, I think based on that intro, many of your listeners probably would naturally expect that, hey, Dave's a domain expert in direct mail, and that's how he spent his career. But I think like many entrepreneurs who, went after, trying to do something different or unique or breathe innovation into a space, I did not come from the direct mail world. And this was certainly the first business that I've built or worked for in the direct mail space. But I do have, over 20 years of consumer internet experience. And I've spent my career, really being born and growing up in this world of, technology, of, brands being built overnight and being able to engage directly with consumers through any number of organic or paid media channels and going from zero to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue in what feels like overnight. And I've spent those 20 years kind of oscillating back and forth between being on the brand side and leveraging all these amazing innovations in marketing, and then being on the marketing technology side, building technology and platforms in emerging digital spaces. So that's my background, and really it was not up until about 6 years ago when Jonathan, my co-founder, and I launched Postie that we had really started developing deep hands-on experience in the direct mail space, and I think philosophically in how I've seen successful startups being built, I think that gave us an advantage over the industry.
Well, yeah, let's dive in then and start talking about our main topic, which is direct mail in a digital age. So let's start. That kind of led us up to you co-founding Postie. What was the opportunity that you saw? I mean, you came from a digital background, and certainly they call it snail mail and all that stuff was maybe not top of mind and everything that was going on. But what opportunities did you see in this world that you could really improve on and build a business around?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we went into this thinking opportunistically at all. We really jumped into this as a need to alleviate some real pain that we as marketers were feeling, and that the portfolio of brands that we were working with were feeling. So if you rewind back to 2016 or so, from our perspective, that was kind of the maybe the beginning of this awakening that, hey, we're really over-indexed in one singular fail point. And that was, social and really Facebook, / Instagram. And, it didn't matter whether you were a digital native challenger brand that had emerged over the last decade, or whether you were a traditional brand that had been around for decades. chances are, your mandate had been, hey, let's build relationships directly with consumers, and the number one way to do that was Facebook. It's where consumers spent all their time, and it's where all the data lived, and it's where all the kind of ad tools to be really systematic in your approach lived. And so it was a double-edged sword. And on one side, it gave us a deeper set of tools and access to data and data science and prediction and testing and optimization at big scale. And that was the great part, right? And that led us, to spend a lot of time and energy and budget, as we all know, based on Facebook's trajectory, in working that channel. But the second edge of the sword was that now all of a sudden we're all kind of bidding up the cost of ad impressions on this platform. Eventually Facebook really hit an asymptote or a ceiling in their supply, and did a great job of having a huge portion of overall ad dollars flood in. And the basic laws of supply and demand is when demand outpaces supply, rates go up. And when rates go up, eventually, you're going to find a place where you can no longer run profitable ad campaigns. And so for us, that wasn't a fear that we were experiencing. That we just, I call it the asymptotic, path to profitability, which is like, hey, if only I could increase my ad budget on this channel by 25%, it would be a profitable channel. But the way that bid-based marketplaces and digital work is in order to deploy that additional 25% of budget, chances are your ad rates are going up. And if your ad rates are going up, then you're never catching that point of profitability. And so for us, it wasn't this like, aha, let's go and reinvent direct mail. It was more of okay, if we have to reallocate, in some cases, millions of dollars a month in media spend in order to keep growing, and we need to do so profitably, and we want to do it in a framework that kind of aligns with our digital sensibilities, our dynamic execution, our test and optimization, our prediction, our building lookalikes and leveraging our first-party CRM data, measuring results of every little test that we run. We had to find another channel or other channels that would allow that. And then we needed to find another channel that not only would allow that, but would also be scalable and worth our time. Yeah. And so that led us to direct mail, where all of a sudden you have the entire addressable US market available. There's great data. It yes, was lacking innovation on the execution and how that data and kind of tactics were being deployed. And so we just looked at it and said, like, hey, like maybe this could be one of the answers. Maybe we could leverage technology to bring this channel into our kind of digital lexicon and mindset, and all of a sudden open up a channel just as big as social, just as big as display, just as big as search. And so that was the mission. That's how we ended up in the direct mail channel.
Great. And were there any skeptics that you ran into? I mean, direct mail sometimes gets a bad rap. I mean, I've worked in the marketing world for a while, and I've actually heard some great statistics about it, but it's kind of considered a dinosaur among, some of these newer technologies and stuff. So, why do you think that is?
Sure. Well, I'll answer the first question initially, which is, were there skeptics? I'm sure there were. I can't, point to one or two. It's not super poignant, because the reality is we had a very opposite effect. Like the minute we opened our mouths and started talking to friends who were CMOs or VP of marketing or growth or acquisition or CRM at some of the notable brands out there. And we've been doing this for a long time. So, we had dozens and dozens of conversations, really smart people. The reaction was exactly the same, which is, dear God, get me off of Facebook. Yeah, that was number one. Yeah. And, oh yeah, if you build it, we will come. Like we don't know if it's possible. Yeah. We're glad you're trying it. It sounds amazing. Your mission aligns exactly with, our needs and our pain points right now. Like, please have at it. And so, really from day one, we had budgets that were kind of flowing into the platform. We had, willing participants looking to test. There was a lot of optimism. I would say probably the maybe few people that may have been skeptics would have been the experienced traditional direct mail marketer who had spent, maybe the past decade trying to break away from direct mail not because it wasn't a great channel, but because it was lacking, tools and sophistication on the marketing technology side. And they were maybe, jealous of, all these amazing bells and whistles and capabilities that their, digital teams down the hall had access to.
Yeah.
And so, even those individuals, as soon as we took them through, a platform demo and showed them what was capable, started getting excited again as well. So there was really very little friction.
So, and talking about some of those technologies and that direct mail person you reference, that may have been wanting to play with the latest toys and everything like that. It sounds like you're definitely using some leading technologies to do that. Can you talk a little bit more about the technologies you're using as well as, the results that you're getting?
Sure. Well, on the results side, it's mind blowing, to be quite honest. I can stand up on this soapbox and say definitively, direct mail is a very powerful, scalable, and performant channel. And it's a channel that can be extraordinarily effective anywhere in your marketing funnel. It can be effective in top of funnel acquisition, in growing new customers. It can be extremely effective in engaging and re-engaging segments within your CRM and building long-term relationships and affecting the way that consumers engage with your brand. And it can be really effective mid-funnel, leveraging identity-based data and all the first-party behavioral data that you work so hard to drive and capture on your websites and your mobile apps. From a kind of core high-level technology perspective, there are three things that we build to and focus on leveraging technology to provide excellence in. One of those is targeting. So, in all of the best, addressable ad channels, the better the data is, the better the technology, the better the machine learning, the better the prediction and optimization and feedback loops, the more effective those channels can be. And there's, very deep first party data that can be unlocked on the direct mail channel. There's, amazing third party data that can be unlocked on the direct mail channel. So we spend a lot of time thinking about targeting, and that leads us to make deep investment in things like machine learning, structural data engineering, complex mathematics. The second bucket is measurement, right? It's great to say, hey, we have this channel that can unlock incredibly effective, performant, razor focused, targeting. But if you don't have the ability to prove the results, then how do you know that's true? And so direct mail is a channel that in most cases allows for direct measurement, just like digital does. And in most cases, it's even cleaner and very transparent because you have direct access to the data. So we spend a lot of time building the tools and data visualization and insights on top of campaign performance to in real time help advertisers make good decisions on what's working, what's not working. And then the third bucket is execution. Direct mail is this, even done digitally, is this, this channel that requires complex manufacturing and logistics every time you want to deploy a campaign. Yeah. It's not just pixels. And so, all the complexities around supply chain management, sourcing paper and ink, third-party logistics and big tanker trucks, and containers moving, mail and paper, in and out of manufacturing facilities, and then liaising with and integrating with the U.S. Postal Service, a 600,000 person organization, is complex. And so, our philosophy is those are things that, don't directly relate to marketing, and the marketer shouldn't have to think about. You shouldn't have to invest in becoming an expert procurement and operations manager. You should be thinking about marketing challenges and marketing goals. And so, we work very hard in integrating and automating the full stack on kind of the back end, so the marketer doesn't have to think about those things anymore.
Yeah, that's great. And I would imagine that's great for a lot of marketers that are probably used to working more in digital realms. And I mean, not everybody's used to matching Pantone colors and watching press runs and all those kinds of things that are coming up in the marketing world necessarily. So to take care of all of that stuff for them probably is a great help.
Yeah, and those are amazing technologies themselves and art forms themselves, and there's there's tremendous amount of excellence that go into the execution component. Yeah. It just is so different than thinking in terms of segmentation within your CRM or building lookalikes attached to high net worth, your high net spend customers or high AOV or recent purchasers, like all those complexities that the marketer needs to think of day in, day out in order to attack marketing goals and P&L goals. If we can handle the back end art form and science on the execution front, then it eliminates a big component of time and education that doesn't directly relate to the goal. Nobody's out there saying, "Hey, I want to send direct mail for the sake of sending direct mail." Right. They're saying, "We think that direct mail may be an answer to hitting our top line growth goals this quarter, or this year, or this decade," and so seamlessness and efficiency are really important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the companies that I work with, they're thinking about that. Whether you call it omni-channel, cross-channel, multi-channel, whatever it is, they're thinking about that multi-channel customer experience, and that involves brick and mortar stores, that involves digital, of course, but it also involves things like direct mail. And so, I think that this definitely fits well. And I know, you work with a lot of great brands. Do you have maybe a success story you could share that kind of illustrates the power of what you do?
Sure. How much time do you have?
Maybe the 2-minute version.
Okay, fair enough. So one that jumps to mind that is I think super poignant and probably valuable for most brands to hear. iOS 14 rolled out, right? Gosh, I don't know how many months ago now. I think we're on 16 now, but that changed the ability to engage and measure and target cross-device, and that had a $10 billion negative effect on Facebook's ecosystem, right? I think they came out and that was their own statement was the iOS 14 changes to measurement and trackability had led to a $10 billion decline in ad revenue. So that means that there was $10 billion of ads that couldn't be served, and that affected many advertisers and their growth goals and their ability to effectively advertise on Facebook. So one use case that stands out is a notable home improvement brand that we had worked with, and we're probably an incremental component of their marketing stack for 3-4 years. All of a sudden, came to us and in one of our weekly status calls said, Facebook doesn't work anymore. Yeah. I mean, it was full pause, right? It wasn't, we took a 10% hit and we need to find some other channels to scale. It was, we can't make prospecting on Facebook work anymore. Yeah. Now, I will fast forward to then, to a few months later, they retrain, the algorithm changes. They were able to rebuild the channel, not to the same level of scale they were at, prior to iOS 14 changes.
Right.
But they eventually did find some efficiency with Facebook. But in that 3-4 month gap, when they obviously were very nervous and did not know that they were going to be able to rebuild Facebook as a prospecting channel, started leaning in much more heavily into DM. And within 60 days or so, had found that direct mail was as scalable and as efficient from a performance perspective, return on ad spend perspective, as Facebook had been. And all of a sudden they had this multi-million-dollar a month channel. I think they're spending something like $3 million a month right now in direct mail on prospecting alone. And even though Facebook's working, their philosophy is they now have another channel. They will never be caught in a position where any one channel is making up 80% plus of their acquisition efforts. And And we kind of looked at him and said, this performance was there all along. You just weren't willing yet to carve out some of your Facebook budget to test into it. And of course, we have a great relationship with them, and their attitude is, we'll listen a little bit more closely next time. But I think the story is, in a world where the regulatory landscape is changing, the technology landscape is changing. There are real fears of Google deprecating the cookie, which would be just a massive blow to digital.
Right.
The fidelity of targeting and measurement and performance. There are other channels out there, and direct mail is one of them, that won't be affected in the same way, and that is scalable, is performant, and now has the same technology available to, as is available in search and social, programmatic, email, etc.
Yeah, well, and I think, what you're saying also touches on just the general idea of diversity in marketing. I saw another stat with small businesses that 81% of them rely on email as their primary customer acquisition channel. So what if email stops working as effectively, just like the Facebook example that you gave? And to your point, they're still having massive losses of ad revenue, which means their advertisers are certainly not performing as well, even if they've made some improvements and adjustments. So what would your advice be to, think about? I think diversity in all things is beneficial, but, diversity in marketing mix, what would your advice be to someone, a brand maybe that is reluctant to shift those dollars? Like, what's a way for them to get started?
Yeah, it's not an option. You have to diversify your marketing stack. You have to stop drinking, the Kool-Aid on just focusing on what's hot, and thinking holistically about your brand, your business, your customers, the prospects that are out there, and then take the approach of thinking about de-risking your marketing stack by not thinking about, hey, we have to make Facebook or Instagram work or TikTok work, but rather, where are our customers spending time? What are the specific ways that we can engage with them in meaningful ways? What are the platforms that give us the ability to do this efficiently? And if we find success, can scale. You don't want to be spending too much time working on putting a ton of effort optimizing a channel that might perform but that can't scale. And you just, nothing stays constant. I don't want to date myself too much, but I've been in kind of the digital consumer internet world since 1999. There's always a new shiny channel or a new technology. That technology always ends up getting that platform always ends up getting saturated, and becomes harder and harder to rely on. There's always another emerging channel. The last decade's been a little bit different because it's been the decade of consolidation within Facebook and Google, right? Two behemoths that capture about 85 cents in every dollar of digital ad spend. And so there was a while there that we were looking and saying, hey, this seems like it's going to last forever. Like, Facebook's never going to go away,
right?
And it certainly felt that way. And then it did, right? It didn't go away, but things changed, became harder, became less profitable. In many cases, became unprofitable, and it's just a component of scale and volume. It's not a ROI driver, and so I think the easiest path to training your own mind, training your marketing team, training your exec team to think about a willingness to constantly be testing and exploring, is not to come and have to create a forum where you're always fighting for more ad dollars or more experimentation dollars, but rather from the start carve out a percentage of your budget that is earmarked for experimentation. So you're working in Q4 to create your 2023 media budget. Instead of building the budget and then going to fight for incremental dollars later on, carve out 20% of your 2023 budget, earmark it for experimentation. Don't put an ROI target on it, and And then moving forward, throughout the year, then the decision becomes, where do we want to allocate the 20% this month or this quarter? It's not, can we get the budget to test something?
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit of a different shift in thinking, but it then sets your organization up to never be like this, home services business where all of a sudden Facebook's algorithm changes, Google deprecates the cookie, Google's algorithm changes, and all of a sudden your biggest media channels don't work, and now you're rebuilding from scratch. You have experiments going on already.
Yeah. I love that advice about, setting aside the 20%. I mean, we're on the Agile Brand podcast here. So, I'm a big fan of agile, iterative, continuous improvement, all of that stuff. And I think, to your point, to plan to have that ability to be able to test and do pilot projects, proofs of concept, whatever you want to call them, that could eventually turn into something that is part of the marketing mix. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, for sure. And even within the channels that are working for you, you should be allocating, test budget to test new ads, new targets, new models, new segments, not because you're expecting them all to deliver, an incremental ROI, but because you never know when that model or that ad campaign is going to stop performing, and you always want to have something to fall back on. You always want to certainly try and find performance gains, but B, kind of hedge your bet. And so that experimental budget can be for a new channel, it can be for new creative, it can be for new targeting, it can be for a completely different use case, and any of those things. And throughout a year, you should be able to experiment a lot. That really is our job and our mission as marketers. That the world changes, consumer behavior, sentiment changes, and technologies and channels that consumers are engaging with change too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one last question before we wrap up. You've already given plenty of great tips and advice already, but any additional advice for marketers as they navigate the months ahead? We're coming up on the end of the year. We're coming up on, continued uncertainty about, certainly many things. Any advice for marketers for the months ahead?
Sure. I think one piece that is a little bit of a cheat code, call it, is, every single marketer and every single brand is going through the same thing, right? Yeah, they're going through the same set of channels. They're going through the same, fears and concerns. They're kind of dealing with the same macro things, but they're each exposed to micro things as well. They've chosen to test or experiment with, something unique compared to competitors or other marketers at like companies. They've read slightly different articles. They have different backgrounds or perspectives, and collectively there's a lot of information and knowledge out there. So I think something that's become harder in a post-COVID world, but is now maybe re-emerging, is the idea of networking and building professional networks to be able to kind of learn from. If you're meeting up with 10 VP of marketings or 10 marketing directors or 10 CMOs or whatever level you're at, and you're doing that weekly or monthly, or you have a Slack channel that you can all pop in on, now you have 10 times the knowledge base, 10 times the data to learn from. So I think, as you're making decisions on where you're interested in leaning in the coming months, quarters, years, you shouldn't be living in a vacuum. So I think trust the greater market.
Wonderful. Yeah, love it. Well, Dave, thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so we try hard to publish great content on our website and our blog, which can be found at postie.com, postie.com. For me personally, trying to get a bit more active in the content that I'm sharing on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn and LinkedIn Messenger is a really great professional platform for me, really easy way to connect and engage. And my handle is David L. Fink. And we can share those in the show notes with you as well.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Dave Fink, CEO and co-founder of Postie, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by TEKsystems.
If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkillstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.